The topic of climate change still remains controversial because predictions without direct evidence are easily susceptible to criticism. A common misconception of climate variability is that only certain areas will increase in temperature as carbon dioxide emissions continue to accumulate in the atmosphere. As the atmosphere's chemical content is altered by anthropogenic emissions, the ocean's chemistry is drastically affected as well. Known as the other carbon dioxide problem, the severity of increased carbon levels in the ocean has recently come to the IPCC's attention. This increase in surface concentration has disrupted the ocean's natural state by chemically altering the pH levels of seawater. Since pre-industrial times, the ocean is estimated to have increased in acidity by 30%. Although little is still known about the complexity of acidification, the first IPCC report expressed concern and attempted to address this problem. For the past 2 decades, the scientific consensus regarding acidification has changed considerably due to a better understanding of the matter. Explanation of the acidification process can be broken down into 4 parts. First, the distribution of anthropogenic carbon. Second, the carbon cycle and its chemistry. Third, changes in ocean acidity. And fourth, how aquatic life will respond to these changes. For further understanding, this video will address each of these topics and explain how the scientific consensus has changed over time. Distribution of anthropogenic carbon. Higher atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide will increase the ocean's level as well. The ocean essentially acts as a large sink, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in order to maintain balance. It is responsible for accumulating and storing about 1/3 of the total anthropogenic carbon. Since the Industrial Revolution, chemical processes have struggled to reach an equilibrium that can be maintained. The carbon cycle has the ability to adapt to variability. However, it was unprepared for the drastic amounts of carbon dioxide released by anthropogenic emissions. Ice cores that have trapped chemical information can tell us the atmosphere's content of carbon dioxide at given time periods. The polar ice cores have indicated that before the Industrial Revolution, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels were about 280 parts per million. Today, they have reached 353 parts per million and continue to grow exponentially. The first IPCC report explains that the differences in partial pressures between the atmosphere and surface water causes carbon dioxide to be exchanged either by oceanic uptake or outgassing into the atmosphere. Excess carbon in the atmosphere is assumed to have been the cause of shifts in carbon dioxide concentrations. However, the source of excess carbon could not be directly traced to anthropogenic emissions. This was mentioned in the first report. The second IPCC report confesses similar consensus, claiming the distribution of carbon still is too complex and has natural variability, thus cannot be linked to human emissions until the system is better understood. In the fourth report, the connection between excess carbon and anthropogenic emissions is made. The sum of the atmosphere and ocean's increase in carbon dioxide is equivalent to the estimated net anthropogenic emissions. Once this was established, human-induced production of carbon dioxide is a direct cause of increased oceanic carbon and acidification. Similar to the net flux between surface water and the atmosphere, carbon is exported into deeper waters through a process of ventilation. Conversely, the transfer of carbon between layers of the ocean is a much longer process than the air-to-seawater exchange. The biological pump provides an equilibrium of carbon and nutrients within the ocean. Carbon is exported to deeper waters and is eventually balanced by the upwelling of deep, nutrient-rich waters that replenish the surface. However, the biological pump does not in any way isolate anthropogenic carbon from the cycle. In addition, deep circulation is estimated to take up to hundreds of years. This delay would normally be balanced out in a healthy carbon cycle, but due to the rapid production of excess carbon dioxide, many oceanic regions have abnormally high concentrations of carbon within the ocean surface layer. According to the third assessment, areas where upwelling occurs are supposed to outgas carbon brought up from the deep ocean. However, if the atmosphere's partial pressure is greater, carbon is prevented from being outgassed, and even more carbon accumulates at the ocean's surface. The fourth report confirms that more than 50% of anthropogenic carbon is within the upper 400 meters of the oceans. Carbon cycle and chemistry. Before the Industrial Revolution, the carbon cycle had the ability to maintain balance through scrubbing and circulation of carbon. However, this balance is thrown off by the addition of carbon dioxide that has made its way into the cycle. When more carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, concentration of carbonate ions decreases because excess hydrogen ions from carbonic acid want to bond with carbonate to form bicarbonate. As carbonate becomes less available to react with dissolved inorganic carbon, more carbon dioxide remains in its dissolved form. This limits the uptake into the ocean. Therefore, when carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increases, the surface ocean's ability to absorb decreases. The consensus of the third report states that carbon in the ocean can exist in three forms. 91% of carbon is found in the bicarbonate form, while only 8% is pure carbonate and 1% remains as dissolved carbon dioxide. The ocean is very effective in absorbing carbon dioxide gas because of its chemical reactivity and solubility. Once dissolved into the surface, the carbon dioxide dissociates into ions to interact with the seawater. Carbon is utilized by aquatic organisms during biological processes such as photosynthesis and calcification. Organisms also exchange carbon back into the water during decomposition, autotrophic respiration, and heterotrophic respiration. According to the third IPCC assessment, phytoplankton produce about 45 billion metric tons of carbon every year. The carbon is also exchanged when carbonate ions are used to form calcium carbonate. When there are high amounts of carbonate, the ocean's capacity to absorb atmospheric carbon increases as well. This natural process maintains a healthy equilibrium, which prevents the distribution of carbon from having any damaging effects. However, all reports state the uncertainty of how much the carbon cycle can be manipulated by excess anthropogenic carbon before it reaches its tipping point. Changes in acidity. When seawater absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it becomes dissolved inorganic carbon and reacts with the water to form carbonic acid. To put it simply, as carbon dioxide uptake increases, the amount of carbonic acid will increase, thus increasing the acidity of the seawater. A lower pH value has corrosive behavior, which will threaten the survival of marine biota that require calcium carbonate for structure. The carbonic acid dissociates into a free hydrogen ion and a bicarbonate ion. These free hydrogen ions will attempt to bond with free carbonate ions, further increasing the amounts of bicarbonates. So, as the amount of free hydrogen ions increase, the amount of available carbonate decreases. Aquatic organisms will be directly affected by this because they depend on carbonate and calcium ions to form their shells and skeletons. Therefore, more hydrogen ions caused by the increased carbon dioxide uptake will limit organisms from carbonate ions and could be significant enough to corrode calcium carbonate structures. A lack of carbonate will attempt to chemically balance by dissolving the organism's shells and skeletons of calcium carbonate. As stated earlier, the ocean, on a global scale, has become 30% more acidic since the Industrial Revolution. This drastic increase over a short period of time has severe consequences and may trigger an irreversible effect before aquatic life has the chance to adapt and survive. Aquatic life response. As acidity increases, carbonate ions become less available to marine organisms that depend on calcium carbonate to survive. A lower pH can also begin to dissolve calcium carbonate shells, or the skeletons of living organisms. Acidification poses a serious threat on the survival of aquatic life and coral reef habitat. If seawater becomes too acidic, its corrosive behavior can wipe out reef ecosystems completely. At the base of the food web, the shells of pteropods are very sensitive to the increasing acidity. If their populations are reduced, all organisms higher on the food chain will experience limited food supplies. It is difficult to predict how increased carbon will affect nutrient levels and productivity rates, but marine biota has the ability to adapt, yet little is known on how organisms will respond to this increase of acidity. Scientific understanding of the chemistry involved in the acidification process has fundamental understanding, therefore is not susceptible to controversy. Conversely, the consensus of how increased acidity will impact marine biota still contains uncertainties. Therefore, the fourth report did not establish any official predictions on this matter. The shift in organic chemistry, in terms of carbonate and bicarbonate, has been directly linked to the excess carbon produced by anthropogenic emissions.